Welcome back to Language of the Soul, Conversations on Healing and Growth. I'm Ben Umstead.
And I'm Martin Perkins.
This episode is going to focus on education, the mental health epidemic, behavioral patterns in school classrooms, the nature of classrooms themselves. So, with us today are two extraordinary guests, friends, really, co conspirators in consciousness, you might even say. Treasa, hello, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to come and share this experience with everyone. I am Treasa Gage Edwards. I have been teaching for 26 years. As an educator, I am teaching mathematics, a secondary educator. So I get students who are 13 and older. My journey started with education from school. I actually didn't want to be a teacher, y'all, but I seem to have joined this path and stayed with it. Same school, same district, same topic. I've taught everything from pre-algebra to pre-calculus, and I enjoy it. So not only do I teach mathematics in high school, but I am a pastor, a lead pastor at a church. They call me Pastor T there. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been a lead pastor for 5 years. That journey started probably 20 years ago with studies. The other thing that I do is teach night school. I teach night school and I actually coordinate a few teachers. And so we teach everything from math, English, science, social studies, all the core subjects, a few electives, languages. So we see about maybe 200 students. And so I do leadership in that role also. So no, I'm not an assistant principal. I just do the teacher leader thing. I'm a mom. I have 8 beautiful children. I think I got extended children somewhere in there too, but I have 8 kids and they range from the age of 34 to 17. All have finished high school. 2 are in college now. I have 5 grandchildren. I just had a newest one. We're waiting for a little RJ, get strong enough to come home from the hospital. I am a widow, been married for 21 years before my husband passed, and it's taken a toll also. Before he passed, I started this journey with Simplicity Farm, the healing and growth, language of the soul. I don't even think that's what it was called when we first started.
It was cultivating an intuitive life when you first started out the first year. So you're spot on.
Okay. And so with the cultivating of the soul, people used to ask me, what are you doing? I say, it's my soul class. I called it my soul class. So my soul class. And I told them I go and I learn about myself. Oh, that journey's been interesting. The visions, the visuals, the understanding of they, them, me, us, everybody, what I call at my table. Everyone's at my table. And I understand we're all the same. We're all the same person. I just see them in different lights depending on the role I have to play in the classroom and outside the classroom, in the church, in the community.
Hi, Nichelle.
Hi there, Ben and Treasa and Marty. It's so good. Like Treasa, I thank you all for this opportunity. By introduction, I'm Nichelle Owens, and I also work as an educator here in the Maryland area. I've been a classroom teacher, technology trainer, assistant principal, and now I serve as a district leader for early childhood and elementary education age students. My journey into education has been long coming. It started when I think I was 6 years old, and I got a chalkboard, a welcome back Cotter chalkboard. That tells you how old I am, for Christmas. And I loved that chalkboard. I taught every day on that chalkboard. I just knew I wanted to be a teacher. It's something that's been in my spirit for quite some time. And I do recall telling members of my family, hey, I want to be a teacher. My mom was definitely supportive, but I did have a family member who just said, no, don't do it. And the comment was, you're too smart for that. And that stung. It's like, whoa, what does that mean? It's something that I'm just so glad that I've done and that it's been placed in my spirit to do. I appreciate every year that I've been an educator. Every year has been a learning experience for me.
So as a matter of introduction into the conversation that I brought us together to have today, I want to encourage us to look at the larger picture that there is a manner in which, and I say this, our children, in other words, as a father, as someone who just deeply cares about community in general, our children are at a stage, in a very broad sense, of being untethered in some way. There's the institutions, the families, the effects of things like the pandemic have all kind of come together in a kind of confluence that, whether we call it a mental health crisis, however we call it, whatever label we put on it, we're at this stage where our kids need support. They need different kinds of support. And I wanted to have a conversation with two people whom I respect enormously and who I witness them doing their own inner work, and wanting to have a conversation around, what do you think about, you being Nichelle and Treasa, what do you think about what it means to be an educator in this place, this time? So I guess I want to begin by asking the question, what does it even mean to you when you hear in the larger world saying there's a mental health crisis? What, in a grounded sense, what does that mean to you as educators, as mothers, as members of your community? Nichelle, maybe you'll start us off?
Sure. So I'll start as an educator. When I hear that there's a mental health crisis, I am aware of behaviors that we're seeing in school districts for sure. As an educator, I just refrain from placing the label mental health crisis on it because it's not my work. But I certainly think the work that we do in education brings to light some evidence that we are, as a nation, seeing the effects of mental health challenges in our overall community. So it's not just isolated to our schools, right? Things that happen in society often show up in our school buildings. And that's what makes the work of educators so challenging. We didn't create the conditions, but we're often called to solve those conditions and solve the issues. While I do hear stories from colleagues, principal colleagues, from teachers, from other educators, talking about some of the challenging behaviors that they see in schools, I wanted to kind of ground everything in some facts. So there was an article in Education Week. It was published in April of 2023. And there were teachers who were surveyed, educators who were surveyed. And the article states that 70% of educators say that students in their schools are misbehaving more now compared to what they were experiencing in fall of 2019. And I think if you ask any educator, they're going to agree with that. Absolutely. The behaviors are different. And so the pandemic has not only affected the behaviors, but I think as educators, we're also seeing a lack of motivation and excitement for school, right? That's resulting in some behaviors that I don't see. I work with the small children, or, the program that I support works with small children. But, we do see some bullying, we see disrespectful behaviors, we hear about in high schools behaviors related to drugs and bullying that includes, more physicality. So I just see our children hurting. I see our society hurting. And I see this as a situation where, as a society, we just don't know how to handle conflict. And oftentimes we thrive. Some of us thrive off of conflict and don't know how to come to a place of peace and calm. That's really disturbing for me because of the journey that I've experienced. To be in a place of peace and harmony, that's always my goal, but that's just not where everyone is right now. So I'll just sum up and say that when I hear people talk about a mental health crisis and challenging behaviors in schools, they're pretty accurate with it. Pretty accurate.
Thanks, Nichelle. Treasa, where would be the It's kind of the track that you would take into how this appears to you in your experience.
Well, when I think about what I see from when I first started teaching, the behaviors are different. Students need different things now than what they needed before. When I first started, I thought students who dealt drugs was bad and would see them doing it in school and they didn't care. Now, the kids are still doing it, but now it's not the same drug. The drugs are worse. I see in high school those things, and the students are using them, whether they're getting from their friends, whether they're getting them from wherever they're getting them from, and they don't care. And it hurts my heart to see the behaviors that they have. And I'm thinking they're not loved, or they just need to know something different, learn something different, do something different, but they can't if they don't know it, if no one's teaching it to them. So as educators, we bring in everything we know. We have to tell them what kind of experiences they can have, something that's outside of what they see. And a lot of times they only see what they see in front of them. They'll tell me things of, I've never been outside of Maryland, or I have been to this country, but we've been here and I didn't know that existed. Those activities happen. And I'm baffled sometimes when I see students tell me, I've never done that before. I've never heard that before. It's a whole world out here. And they think that their bubble, their world where they're doing the drugs, and that's the only thing that they know. Or if they are stealing cars, my students have to teach me a lot of things. We have conversations and I go, that happens? No, that's my bubble, right? It's not my world. But talking to them, I learned something new. I learned something different. But it hurts my heart. And I just said to them, there's something out there for you that this does not involve. And you can do something different. Miss Edwards, nobody cares about me. I care. Watching their behaviors, someone has to tell them they care, show them that you care. Because a lot of times, if they don't think you care, if you're not showing it, you can say all you want. But if you're not showing it, they don't believe you. And it might take some time. But when you build those relationships, then the work that we do and that we've been doing begins to show, and we can pour out onto them. And then they begin to make small incremental changes. But I'm just one. Nichelle's just one. So how many more people would it take to support that, to change those behaviors, for them to understand that there's something else out there other than what you're doing? What could it be? Well, let's have that conversation.
How is it that we show our communities, our children, that deep sense of caring? Because often they're coming from family structures where both parents have one, sometimes multiple jobs. So mom and dad are both working, often, like I say, more than one job. And it's often hard for a young person to get the measure of that. In other words, mom and dad are working so hard at these jobs because they love me. But it's hard to feel that measure when they're not there. So in many ways, it ends up being that the educator carries, right or wrong, the brunt of that responsibility, because often an educator or educators have more time with kids than the parents ever do. So I'm curious, how have you cultivated the muscles that it takes? How have you cultivated those muscles, those practices in yourself?
Practice. I think it's something I'm called to do. Coming into teaching and education, cannot take it lightly. It is a big job. So for me, when I came into teaching, the most exciting part of it was being able to help someone, right? And that was one of my issues, always wanting to be there and be out front and always helping someone else and forgetting to help myself. So I had to learn to do that. And so since I've been on this journey, I've been working on, how do I take care of me? I actually share that with the students. I share, we have to take care of ourselves. But if you're doing all these things to your body, it's not going to help any. We have conversations about families. We have conversations about friendships, relationships, without getting personal for high schoolers, secondary school. we have those conversations. It's easier to have those conversations, to talk about those things. And it's easier for me to call and tell parents, guess what happened today? For a parent to go, are you calling me because my son or my daughter was misbehaving today? No. They're not misbehaving? No. And it's shocking parents. And the kids go, I did wonderful. Yes, you did. And we're going to let them know you did wonderful. And we're going to keep calling. We're going to keep encouraging to the point I might not see the end result of it, the big change that everybody wants, but I see the little ones. I'm coming to school, Miss Edwards, and I'm coming to your class. If I go to no other class, I'm coming to yours. Okay, here's the challenge. Now, how do I take and get enough energy to make sure I'm still pouring into that one child who may be just wreaking havoc on the building, show to my class, and now we got to work on how do you do these things? And most of it is conversation, learning what the student likes, figuring out why they're doing what they do. And after a while, the students actually give you a clue. They tell you, this is what's going on with me. I can't read. And once we figure out what's causing some of those issues, oh, my mom is never home. My dad don't care. He ain't never been in a picture. Then we start to have those things and figure out ways, how can we support? Even to the point, sometimes I'm not sure about elementary students, but they don't eat. The basic needs need to be met most times. And part of that is the same way we're sitting here just having a conversation, getting to know them. And it makes a difference. So in my journey, I share what I have learned and said, this is what I do. And in those instances where maybe they're really having a bad day and they need to take a seat somewhere and sit down and take a breath, I teach them how I take breaths. I teach them how to journal, give them journals and pencils and crayons, and I just sit. I just sit quietly sometimes with them. That's making a difference little by little.
It's very inspiring for me to hear you describe it. And though, you and I, through our work together, we have these conversations largely centered around you, it's so inspiring to hear the manner in which, our work together around meditation, around journaling is finding its way into the classroom. I'm awed by the manner in which you're sharing just the potence of how you've learned to feed and nourish yourself, and then now you're sharing that nourishment with your students. It's beautiful. So Nichelle, in hearing what Treasa just shared, and I know you have your version of this, right?
Yeah, thank you. So first, I mean, I have to mute myself, Treasa, when you're talking because I'm over here amening, giving you snaps because you are spot on with the whole idea of showing children that you love them, right? That is the call for us. And that's the first step for children. And it's the first step for us as educators to create a climate in which a child will feel like they may thrive, right? They have to know that someone for those 6 hours and 25 minutes that they're in that building, that there's at least one person who loves them. And that is something that is critical, but it is now a challenge for educators. It's a challenge because of the behaviors that you talked about, Treasa. And you are absolutely right that as teachers, we have to care for ourselves. And here's the deal. When we first started teaching, it was so selfless. We poured like crazy. It was common. All of my teacher colleagues and I, we just have to run to the store. Got to get this. Got to make sure this is right. We're going to stay until 7 and make sure everything is all ready. And we'll be back here at 7 in the morning. Teachers can't do that anymore because the demands on them are so much right now that it is critical for teachers to care for themselves and for our school leaders and district leaders to also care for teachers. So I've seen where there are schools that may say, hey, we're going to have food trucks come in on Friday. So the teachers can go and just grab something to eat. It's small, but it lets the teachers know that there is a leader who cares for them. So I think for me now in a leadership role, a lot of the work that I have to do now is to focus on creating conditions where the leaders and the teachers can thrive for the benefit of the children. I think that's a really big piece. The other thing that I think happens is just making sure that the climate is right for children. In order to do that, we have to do a little outreach, right? And we have to reach the parents and talk to parents. And what I've learned in my work is that more than anything, parents and children want to be heard. You're right, Treasa. It's about having the conversations for both the parent and the child. They want to talk about their experiences and they want to work through. And as parents, they want to know that you are not you, Treasa, but you as educators, all of us, that we're not judging them and their situation, but that we are loving their child and assuming that the parents also want the best for their children. And so as teachers, sometimes we have to pull back on some of our judgments and some of our biases that we inherently have. Like everybody has an implicit bias. For me, in terms of how this shows up, it does show up by listening a lot. I have listened and heard a lot of stories. I tell people I'm a vault. You tell me something and I hold on to it because I know that people just want to be heard. Half of the time, I try not to remember it because I don't want to have to recount someone's story. It also shows up for me, Marty, in terms of just being introspective. And you know that my commute can be pretty lengthy. And so a lot of times I'll just drive and kind of replay my day and consider, how can I be better for a family or for another educator or for a colleague. And then I think the biggest piece, a lot more empathy, right? To think about the other person's experience. That's always where I go. Like, what is it that this person is experiencing in order for them to display this behavior? I want to understand it. I want to feel it. I want to know how I can help. I guess some people would call that empathy, right? Like stepping into the other person's shoes. So I try to do a lot of that. And then most importantly, because education is such a people-driven profession and my spirit and soul needs rest after engaging in that much peopling, I have to come home and just be quiet. It's just quiet. No news, maybe some soft music. Silence has been the thing that makes me somewhat whole again, and rest. I do use my weekends to get plenty of rest. So Monday mornings are always filled with ideas and greatness. By Friday, maybe not so much. Engaging in a silence practice, engaging in reflection. I do also do some journaling, not so much about work, but more so about how I'm experiencing the world. But all of those things help me to show up in education and still be excited about my work after all of these years.
That word excitement, it so speaks in the tone, the energy with which you're speaking about what you do. When you said, on my way home, I'll contemplate around how I could be better. And in spite of the fact that you're coming home from a long day at work, the fact that you have the energy, and yes, it's a reflection of a really beautiful heart and a very, very keen intellect, but it's also a reflection that you're on your way home from work and you're like, I could do this or this better. That's a reflection that you're well rested. Because an exhausted human being isn't able to attune to how do I do better. There's just not the bandwidth for better. right? When you're, at the end of a day, when there's hardly words, let alone thoughts around like, thoughts of like how I could do better when you're exhausted. And the fact that you both are talking about to varying degrees, how do I take care of me? How have I taken care of myself? How am I doing it better? Treasa, you spoke of it so articulately in the sense that I share with my kids my practices. I share with them how to get in better touch with yourselves. And I know that you've done enormous amounts of attunement, Nichelle, around bringing for want of no other word, an ever healthier culture to your workplace, right? As a leader, right? And I hear you both kind of saying that, like, how do we bring more of the parts of ourselves that can enhance that? And regardless of what label we put to what we're talking around emotional intelligence for our children, it's really articulated so beautifully in what you're saying. I do have a question, though, to bring to both of you, which is, and you touched on this a little bit, Treasa, how do we begin to change this conversation that exists between educators and parents? Because it feels a little bit to me like it's become ruffled.
Let's see. I don't know where everybody else begins, but a good place, when I call a parent, right? I try to call good, bad, or indifferent. And I try to start at the beginning of the school year. That there's a relationship here. You can call me. I should be able to call you. And we're going to get through this year and get your child through this course. And we're going to get them through this high school, because most of the time I got the students who are transitioning from 8th grade to 9th grade. That's what I get most of the time. And they're scared. This is something new, a new place. There are not so many, I don't know what they call it, Nichelle, when in middle school, because there are more constraints. They can't go certain places. They have to move as a group. In high school, they move freely. And so the kids get off track. And so reaching out to the parent and talking with them, letting them know that I'm here and I am willing to support where we can, so that you don't think that your child just was sent off to high school. And now that they're not with the same teachers, and a lot of times they just don't get all the information. And so being able to give them access to different activities, information that they just don't have. And it's always an issue with parents who don't speak English. They don't know how to have conversations with the school. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. They're afraid of different things, even if they're undocumented. And what they need is just someone to say, okay, I'm trying. And I think educators, I've seen people come into education and not understanding, I don't speak French, but I'm going to go un, deux, trois. I'm going to learn something. And the parents and the students appreciate your trying. But I've seen some teachers just go, no, they just need to learn English. How are you going to build that relationship, telling them what they need to learn, and you're not even trying to meet them somewhere? My favorite is talking about food. I love food. So I like talking about food and different cultures and how to cook something and tasting something. And parents love feeding you. I would not recommend eating anything and everything, but I'm just saying, I love having those conversations and trying different things. And parents really enjoy just conversating, not necessarily just my child is being bad. They don't want to hear that all the time. It discourages them. I know, I've done it for years. I start calling day one and not call parents for about 30 days until I've talked to every parent that I can. Sometimes we don't have good information, but I try. Send a letter home, and no one on the district level can tell me I didn't reach out to a parent. Well, yes, I did. But we have to have a conversation. We have to call, and it has to be not just about school.
I love what you're describing around, in essence, you're saying we're going to have rapport, whether your student is the A student or the whatever student. It doesn't matter what grades. I want to have this connection with you because your child matters. And I know as a parent, to get such a thing is golden. I see that those educators in a completely different light, because you have that feeling, oh, my child's been seen. because in many ways the parent feels seen by the call as much as they feel their child has been seen. It's a beautiful thing, and it does take energy, but if it's a little bit each day, it gets done.
You don't start to feel overwhelmed. And when Nichelle said we need to rest, because what happens if the quarter is ending? That's 45 days. In 45 days, you haven't called one parent? I think that's a problem, because you have students who do wonderful things. You have students who are challenging. At some point, I should have talked to a parent to say, help me. What are you doing at home? How can I challenge this energy in class? What works? So if you're having challenges as an educator in the classroom and you don't know what to do, and you done talked to the next teacher, and you've talked to administrator, and you've talked to the principal, and then the district gets involved and say, well, have you tried to do that? Because some of us have mentors depending on what's going on. But if you tried, I would the parent know. It's also helpful sometimes, just like from parents to hear, for us teachers to hear, parent is struggling too. Now, what are we going to do as a team? What are we going to do together? Because we have to do something. I'm sure we can figure it out. And sometimes it takes thinking outside the box. But after doing that, in a 45-day period and not trying to get it all in 2 days, 5 days, it will drain you. So, yeah, stretch it out.
Another aspect to what I hear you describing is, in order for you to embody such a thing, it means that number one, you're well rested in order to sustain such a thing. You have a stillness practice in place so that you can be with the parent, good, bad, or indifferent. And the result of those two practices in being rested and having a stillness practice is that you bring a level of presence on every level, physical, emotional, intellectual presence that you're bringing to the fore so that you can meet the parents wherever they are. And I think that speaks to what Nichelle was saying earlier about that we all bring some level of implicit bias into our interactions, into our lives. The question is how will we practice with the bias? And you're really articulating a stunning, emotionally brilliant approach. Nichelle, what are your thoughts on what we're touching upon?
I appreciate hearing the similarities between elementary and early childhood and then high school, because in actuality, in our pre-K Head Start programs, it is encouraged. Actually, within the Head Start standards, they actually talk about home visits, right? That's just another form of making a connection with families. Now, we know that not everyone can do a home visit. That's understandable. But the point is to make some type of connection with the family. In some cases, the families will talk about their needs, and they're more likely to talk about those needs when the children are 4, 4 and 5, when they're little. They'll tell you a lot more. And so I think the practice of reaching out to families is critical. And the sad part for us as educators is this is not in any of our pre-service education programs. There is not one class that I took that said, this is how you talk to parents. This is how you reach out to parents. This is the right thing to do. It's as if, we're expected to know. And some of us just aren't. If you're teaching in a community that you may not be familiar with, it may not be so natural for you. So I do encourage teachers to reach out to families, even when parents call the central office. It's important that we talk to them and have, real conversations with them. I think the other thing that's important about that outreach is it starts to establish some community building between the home and the school. It helps the child see that the parent and the teacher are on the same page. And it really starts a partnership if it's done right. And if all parties are stepping into it with an authentic belief that they are helping their child, right? The child or the student. I think that's critical. And then just going back to some of the topics as a mother, right? My children are now out of school officially. I have to say that every year of each of my child's life, there's been a teacher in place who has really done exactly what Treasa talked about, reached out to me and said, hey, I'm the teacher, and even if it's by email, just letting me know how my kids are doing in class. And when I showed up to school, even when it was in the evening and I was tired and not always at my best, they were always willing to have a full conversation and give me updates. So I try to approach my work like I would want to have been approached when my children were school age. So I think that's a really important piece in terms of how I show up in the practice, is just to remember that I'm on both sides, or I was on both sides of this, right? I was a teacher, I was a mom. So recognizing both sides is important in order to provide the best service to families.
One aspect that I'm considering as I listen to your experiences and your advice is considering the role of a parent and the teamwork and the tapestry that you are both weaving here. For parents that are listening, what else would you want to say from a pragmatic level, connecting how to approach getting access to resources?
I'll jump in. At the elementary and early childhood level, there are actually a host of resources, especially if a parent has their child enrolled in what's called a community school. A community school offers a number of resources to support families. I know that there are some that offer laundry services, some that offer diaper banks, some that offer food pantry. So there are a host of supports for those who have some pretty severe needs for resources beyond education. If a parent is solely looking for just academic support or maybe even some social support, then the first step, it really is to reach out to the teacher. The teacher is the first point of contact, and the teacher can route the parent, as Treasa said earlier, hey, this is the person you want to talk to, and make sure that there's a connection. Parents should also make sure that they are in tune with the website that schools have. Many schools use either Class Dojo or some other type of text communication, so they should continue to check that text communication. And if they have questions, they should always just reach out to the school. I think one of the best things parents should know is that the school is there to support them, right? That is a partnership, and that we don't want, as educators, we never want parents to go like straight up to central office. We really do aim to resolve any issue right here in the schoolhouse is the preferred place. But sometimes it may not even have to go up to the principal. It can easily be resolved in the classroom. Those are some just very basic tips for parents. Oh, also to attend parent-teacher night, any of the meetings that come up. And if you can't attend, just say to the teacher, hey, can we do a phone call instead? Can we do a Zoom? Just so that the teacher knows, hey, I have a parent who's engaged. They just need another format for engagement.
Don't forget, parents also need to make sure that their information is updated in the system. Many times they're moving depending on the community. They change their cell phone numbers for whatever reason. But if you do that, reach out to the school. Make sure you update that information as needed. And that's the quickest way a teacher can reach you, because that's the information we rely on. And it's also important to have, because if something happened at school and the nurse needs to call you, or the assistant principal, you want to be reached. Other resources, as you call into the school, we might not, as educators, know exactly, as Nichelle said, what you should do or where you should go, but we can find the answer out for you and give you the information. So keep in contact with your educator, whoever the teacher is or teachers. Talk to them. So even if you don't get an email or a call from the teacher, you call. And many times, like Title I schools and different programs, they have what they call a parent engagement community officers. And so their job is to make sure that they know what's going on in the community so they can assist you with those resources. And within those schoolhouses, they also have programs to assist families. So yeah, I agree. Go to the website, but reach out, be involved, be involved. Even if it's a language barrier, be involved, because those parent engagement resource officers, they actually speak more than one language. And in the school systems, we actually have offices and people who actually speak different languages, and they actually come to the schoolhouses on those back to school nights and they translate. So stay in touch.
It takes a village to raise a child. Just rings true through all of this. Nichelle, an absolute pleasure. Treasa, amazing. Thank you both so much for being here. If you'd like to check in on what's happening at Simplicity Farm at the Healing and Growth Center with Martin, you can go over to martinperkins.com. There, you're going to find all kinds of resources for acupuncture, for the Language of the Soul course, the book, Language of the Soul, Path of Simplicity, in paperback and as an audiobook. Thank you for joining us.